What's up, amigos? It's Chris Lewit, and this is the Tennis Sports Science Review. I wanted to start talking about tennis research because most people, especially on YouTube or the audience for videos, there's not a lot of actual discussion of research. There's a lot of opinions that are not evidence-based, and just in general in the coaching world, there's not a lot of evidence-based practice. So I wanted to start a video series where I would just talk about tennis research on a regular basis and go over sports science that relates to tennis. It could be exercise science or sports science that's applied to tennis. It's something that I'm studying in college, and I will be going to graduate school. I'd like to get my PhD in biomechanics and health and human performance. So this is something that I'm very interested in. I'm a high-performance tennis coach, but I'm interested in the sports science aspect as it relates to tennis. So I thought it would be very interesting to talk about different research and explore different areas in the literature that I've been studying in college as a kinesiology major, and then also share ideas and maybe develop a community around that. I do a podcast and a video series now on junior development. It's called the Prodigy Maker Show, and it's all about technique and junior development and developing high-performance junior players, things like that. But this show is more about research, so I thought that would be interesting. I'd like to go over the first research area today, and that is just talking about recovery and recovery intervention strategies. I have a new, it's within the last 10 years, there's a 2014 published article by Mark Kovacs, who's one of the leading sports scientists in the world, and he's an expert in tennis-specific exercise science and physiology and training. And I'll share with you the article. The article is by Mark Kovacs and Lindsay Baker. The title of the article is Recovery Interventions and Strategies for Improved Tennis Performance. And it's an open access article. You can search for it on PubMed or any of the research databases out there. This one is published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine in 2014 by Mark Kovacs and Lindsay Baker. And the authors talk about some different ways to improve your recovery for tennis, specifically for tennis, but this could be applied to any sport or to any athletic endeavor. And they talk about three main recovery modalities, which are temperature-based interventions, which is cooling. They talk about compression clothing, which is a new technology, particularly like the Normatec boots that you put on your legs, or you can put them on other appendages. And they talk about electronic techniques for recovery. Also, in another research review video, I'll talk about, they have a second part of their article that's on rehydration and nutrition. But in this video, I just thought we'd talk about the three modalities that they describe, which are temperature-based interventions, electronic stimulation, electronic techniques, and the idea of using, or the concept, the strategy of using compressive clothing. So temperature-based intervention is, most athletes are familiar with ice bathing and different forms of hydrotherapy and cryotherapy. So that's generally the terminology. It's an area that I've studied in my kinesiology major, and cooling has been around, as Mark Kovacs talks about, has been around for thousands of years. The idea of using cold and also heat, especially in terms of hydrotherapy, is centuries, thousands of years old. And the research does support cooling therapy, and specifically cold water immersion, which is sometimes referred to as CWI, cold water immersion, is the standard therapy. And the idea is to make the water temperature between 5 degrees Celsius and 15 degrees Celsius. Usually it's between 45 and 60 degrees Fahrenheit. So a lot of times when I'm advising my my players, a player asking, what should I do for icing or cold therapy, or parents that I work with, they oftentimes don't know the temperature range. So that's kind of important to get the water to a therapeutic temperature, which is typically between 45 and 60 degrees Fahrenheit. You don't want it too cold where you could damage the nerves or the skin, and you don't want it obviously to be too warm where it has no therapeutic effect. So if you can think about keeping the temperature between 5 degrees Celsius and 15 degrees Celsius, the majority of the literature has been done with those temperature ranges. So that would be evidence-based practice between 5 degrees Celsius and 15 degrees Celsius. The CWI is really interesting because cold water immersion, the science currently is still investigative because we don't really know exactly how it works. Scientists have theories of how it works, but we don't really have the proof of why it works. But our basic understanding right now is that there's 4 main ways that the cold therapy or cold hydrotherapy or cold water immersion can help. So one is that the cold, it's a pervasive cold. So the entire musculature and down to the cellular level the temperature is reduced, and that can help with stopping the inflammation process. So some scientists theorize that it's that reduction in temperature, that broad-based reduction in temperature in the immersion is helpful to stop inflammation, which seems to make some logical sense. The second way, and Kovacs and Baker talk about this, is that the hydrostatic pressure of the water at the cellular level is actually helping to flush metabolic waste. And what Kovacs talks about, the article is mainly written by Mark Kovacs, but Lindsay Baker assisted with the research and with the editing, according to the article. But Kovacs says the hydrostatic pressure increases cutaneous interstitial pressure, I'm reading from the article now, to the intravascular space, which may reduce edema and possibly secondary tissue damage. So there's this idea that there's a hydrostatic pressure at the cellular level. It causes fluid shifting, which can reduce edema and possibly also reduce tissue damage, but it also can help move metabolic waste into the bloodstream for removal, which could help speed recovery. So that's one of the other mechanisms that CWI might work, and the jury's still out, the science is still out, but this is one of the theories of why cold water immersion works. It's not just that it reduces the temperature of the tissues, it's that there's a hydropressure effect, a hydrostatic pressure effect at the cellular level. Kovacs goes on to say, the increase in hydrostatic pressure results in a rise of the central blood volume and cardiac output, increasing blood flow and the clearance of waste products. So that is part of the theory. Kovacs also says, and it's interesting to note, he says that cold water immersion has to be in deep water. The deeper the water, the more the response is in terms of hydrostatic pressure. In other words, there was a study done where they immersed a body part, I think it's the arm in the study, arm or leg, and they didn't submerge the appendage deep in the water, and there was no hydrostatic pressure effect, therapeutic effect. So it's important to be completely immersed in the water to have the best possible advantage. Kovacs says, cooling packs or cooling vests have not shown benefits for recovery parameters, possibly because the body area cooled was too small to elicit hydrostatic pressure changes. So it's important to have a full immersion to get the most possible benefit. That could be why, just anecdotally, I always feel better after I do an ice bath versus just wrapping something around my wrist or my ankle or my leg, wrapping a cold pack around my leg, for example. So, in addition, Kovacs talks about cryotherapy and in terms of in a cryogenic chamber, which is a fascinating new technology. The research is still out, but the research is pretty good. And this study is from 2014, so there may be even better research now to prove that there is a benefit from cryotherapy. But Kovacs cites an interesting study in tennis: 5 days of whole body cryotherapy chamber exposure in conjunction with moderate intensity training considerably improved the blood cytokine profile and physical performance of professional tennis players. So that is a reference study. I can include the study in the details below of the video, but essentially 5 days of whole body cryotherapy in conjunction with moderate intensity training considerably improved the blood cytokine, that's like the proteins in the blood and the waste products potentially, and it improved that profile, and the physical performance of professional tennis players, they were ATP ranked between 150 and 900, improved after cryotherapy treatment. So that is another new technology that is maybe less available for most people. It's easier to set up an ice bath than to find a cryogenic chamber, but that is a new type of cold therapy that has potential therapeutic benefits, and the research is ongoing on that. For me personally, I feel safer in an ice bath. It kind of freaks me out to go into those cryogenic chambers, but a lot of athletes, especially professional athletes, are using cryogenic chambers now with similar benefits potentially to traditional cold water immersion, CWI. Kovacs talks about the timing of cooling and the timing of cryotherapy, and he says that investigators have studied this, and if the recovery time is less than 60 minutes, the benefits of cooling techniques are suggested to be less about recovery and more related to pre-cooling for the next exercise bout. So there's this idea that the longer you have until the next performance, the more beneficial that cryotherapy is, at least according to Kovacs. And the shorter time, the less time you have before the next performance, the ice bathing or the cryogenic chamber or cold water immersion, however you're going to do it, is probably less beneficial, at least for performance and for recovery. But it may actually reduce the body temperature, which could be advantageous if you're playing a hot match. You're playing in hot weather in Florida at a national. It could be beneficial in the short term. But the research supports that longer recovery periods of 2 to 4 days after exercise will have the largest effects on recovery and performance, at least according to Kovacs' review of the current available literature. So that's interesting. Kovacs talks about hot water immersion as it compares to cold water immersion. So for hot water immersion, it's typically between 34 and 36 degrees Celsius. There are marked changes in the circulatory, pulmonary, which is the lungs. Circulatory is the vascular system, arteries and veins. Renal, which is the kidneys, and musculoskeletal systems, as a result of increased hydrostatic pressures. So there's this additional hydrostatic effect, hydrostatic pressure effect, even from hot water. It doesn't have to be cold water. Just any water submersion has that potentially beneficial hydrostatic effect. And the effects have been shown to be most pronounced for the whole body head-out immersion rather than partial immersion, as increased pressure is proportional to the size of the immersed body surface area. So this is similar to what we talked about with CWI, is the more body surface area you can put underwater, the better the effects from hydrostatic pressure, whether the water is hot or cold. But according to the research, hot water showed benefits for the whole body, but it was inferior to the recovery from cold water immersion. So according to Kovacs, cold water is better in terms of recovery and performance, according to the latest most recent literature than hot water immersion. Although I love taking a hot bath, I love going to a hot tub and immersing myself in a hot tub, and it feels very good afterwards. But according to the research, cold water immersion in an ice bath, as painful as ice baths are, is more beneficial than simply going in hot water. Kovacs does say, though, that alternating from cold to warm water immersion can accelerate the clearance of blood lactate and creatine kinase, which are signs of muscular damage. So there may be a benefit to contrast therapy, and there is more and more research regarding contrast therapy, and Mark Kovacs has strongly recommended contrast therapy in terms of going between an ice bath and then a hot bath under different time protocols, and also even a hot shower, cold shower, doing a minute or two of each, going back and forth, has been shown, and it's evidence-based to say, it's an evidence-based approach. The research does support that can have a positive impact on the clearance of metabolic waste. In addition, I think I forgot to say that for CWI, for cold water immersion, we talked about the reduction in tissue temperature to potentially benefit and improve, reduce inflammation. And I also talked about the hydrostatic pressure influence, but also when you take a cold bath or you submerge yourself in cold water, it has an analgesic effect. Anytime you ice something, it reduces the pain in that area. So that could be another potential way that CWI helps and that cold therapy helps. And there's also just a mental uplift. That's talked about in numerous other studies. Kovacs did not reference that, but there have been studies that showing that athletes feel better. Their nervous system seems to be cooler. They feel uplifted. They feel a burst of energy after a cold water immersion therapy. And that could be another potential reason why athletes like ice bathing, they like cryotherapy, they like cold hydrotherapy because of the mental uplift, the psychological benefit. So just those 4 areas for cold water therapy are the reduction in inflammation by reducing the tissue temperature, hydrostatic pressure benefit by potentially helping to flush metabolic waste and to reduce edema, the analgesic benefit, because when you put cold on something, you have less pain, which can potentially make you feel better. And the mental uplift, the psychological benefit of cold water immersion. It stimulates the nervous system, and it tends to make people feel more energized and to feel sharper even mentally in terms of their concentration and focus. So there's a lot of potentially positive benefits to cold water immersion, hot water immersion, and contrast therapy. So that is just a simple review of the evidence there from one of the leaders in sports science, Mark Kovacs, on this method, this modality for tennis players specifically. But this could be applied, I think, to all athletes. But there are some major benefits to particularly cold water immersion, but all types of immersion and hydrotherapy and contrast, going back and forth between cold and hot. So let's briefly talk about compressive clothing. Compressive clothing therapy is a new technology. It's a big hit with professional athletes and high-level athletes. And there is some support in the literature that it is helpful. For example, one study found improvements in the time to play. It was specific to tennis. Improvements in the time to play, approximately 10% increase in playing time, a large effect size compared with control in lower body power, as measured by counter movement jump. So vertical jump was better in the athletes who used the compressive garments for their legs, which is pretty cool, and reduced perceived soreness. So that's a cited study in the Kovacs article here, that the compressive clothing, if you haven't seen compressive garments, the big companies, Normatec, and you put these pants on your legs, and it's like a massage for your legs. The garments contract and they squeeze the muscles of the legs. And the idea is it helps push metabolic waste into the bloodstream for faster recovery. So you tend to feel less sore after a session of using compressive clothing. So there seems to be good evidence for this, but Kovacs says more work is needed in comparing how compression of different limbs, so whether you're going to compress the lower limbs versus the upper limbs, and it just seems that more research is needed in general in this kind of new technology, but there is some very promising research so far, at least as of 2014. Remember, 10 years have gone by since this very good review of different recoveries, so I can look in the literature for newer studies that support these things, but I always love studying what Mark Kovacs writes because he's such an expert in the tennis world, and he does a great job of taking exercise science and applying it to tennis in a very specific way, which I really appreciate. There is a study that shows that a combination of hydrotherapy followed by the use of compressive garments appear to be beneficial for tennis players between matches and post-training event, whereas either strategy on its own is less effective, at least according to the study. And that's short term. Remember, the short term, the ice bathing, the cryotherapy doesn't seem to have as much of a benefit, but this is in terms of an immediate benefit for the next match, and that is a combination of hydrotherapy with the compression garment. So that could be a good strategy for tennis players out there, is do your hydrotherapy and then put on the compression pants, and there is evidence to support that will help your performance, or at least potentially help your recovery. Overall, with the recovery in a number of factors, if a combination of cold therapy, compressive clothing, this is a good study. So Kovacs says that if you combine cold therapy, compression clothing, and good sleep hygiene, then you can get those effects that I mentioned. I should have specified that. The effects in the improvement in counter movement jump, the reduced perceived soreness, and the 10% increase in playing time, that was from not just the compression garments, that was from a combination approach of the compression garments, sleep hygiene, and cold therapies together. So if you could, that's a great protocol right there. Cold therapy, compression clothing, a little extra sleep, and you can get those benefits in terms of performance and reduced soreness. So that's pretty cool. The third technique, the third strategy, the third modality that Kovacs talked about is electronic techniques. So these are often called, they're different types of stimulations to the muscle. And there is microcurrent electrical neuromuscular stimulation, there's high volt pulsed current electrical stimulation, there's monophasic high voltage stimulation, and the most frequently used is transcutaneous electrical nerve stimulation. All these are ways of stimulating the muscles to try to improve blood flow and to try to accelerate the muscle metabolite removal. And so the idea is, again, to stimulate the removal of metabolic waste through the vascular system, particularly in this case through the venous system. Electrodes are placed on different muscle motor points, and then they are stimulated electrically. There seems to be, according to Kovacs, there seems to also be a reduction in muscle pain from e-stim, and that can come, there could be an analgesic effect. The research is still ongoing, and there's a lot of different modes of e-stim. So I know that I study a lot in Spain, and e-stim's really big in Spain for recovery, for trying to reduce soreness and reducing pain in the muscular system for athletes. So according to Kovacs, there's a lot of ongoing research here. Remember, this article is dated 2014, so 10 years have passed. There may be more research now, but essentially there needs to be more studies done. One study shows that when used as a recovery modality, electrical stimulation demonstrated some positive effects on creatine kinase activity. So that's one of the metabolic waste removal actions of e-stim. But evidence regarding performance indicators, restoration, such as muscle strength, is still lacking. It seems that some forms of e-stim show some potential positives for athlete recovery, but more research is needed in general, especially for tennis athletes. So we don't have a lot of tennis-specific data, according to Kovacs, that e-stim is helpful, but I think probably in the last 10 years, if we look at some more recent studies, that there's probably more being done in that area. But it seems that the e-stim has more of a positive benefit for recovery, reducing muscle soreness, reducing pain, used as an analgesic, as opposed to actually increasing the performance of the athlete. But again, that still needs to be studied more in further detail and in the future. So I think that is, I found this article as I was studying with the ITPA, which is Mark Kovacs' organization that certifies tennis-specific trainers, physical trainers and strength and conditioning coaches. And I just thought it was like a very good overview, even though it's from 2014, it's a very good overview of some of the different recovery strategies that you could apply if you're a parent and you have a kid who plays, or if you're a player yourself, you're a competitive adult. Like, these are some very good options for you. You have the ice bathing, the cryotherapy, the hydrotherapy, you have hot water therapy, although it's not as effective as hydrotherapy, still beneficial. And you have the idea of contrast therapy. Then you have the compression clothing, which is now, the cost is coming down, and it's very portable. You can take compression garments with you on the road to a tournament, and it's very easy to get like a massage in your hotel room with this type of technology. And there is some evidence showing that it's beneficial. In addition, the e-stim devices are becoming more and more popular now and more prevalent. So as the cost of e-stim comes down, there's going to be portable machines, there's going to be access to e-stim that's more affordable, and so that's another modality that could help you in terms of recovery. But Mark Kovacs is an expert on recovery, and he has advocated and talked very strongly about how tennis athletes need to recover better, and it's one of the keys to performance, one of the keys to being successful in tournaments, and it's one of the keys to training well without injury. So anything you can do to improve your recovery will help you become a better tennis athlete and will help your results, whether it's just being able to practice more at higher intensity, at higher volumes, or to be able to actually play better match to match in a tournament. Kovacs always says that tennis athletes are typically under-recovered. They're typically not overtrained. They're typically under-recovered. So this is a way, using these three modalities, that you can improve your recovery and basically train harder and perform better. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. It's our first sort of tennis science research review. And I'm going to try to put this into a podcast, and also obviously share this on my YouTube channel, where we're going to be doing more sports science stuff. I appreciate you guys listening in, and I'll see you on the next program.